Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about some math rules and we're going to talk about integers. So, in math, we no longer have just 1, 2, 3, 4. We are now introducing negative numbers. So, 0 is no longer our smallest number. We now have negative numbers, numbers that are less than 0. So, let's take a look at this number line. We have in the middle, we have 0. And to the right of 0, we see all the numbers that are positive, the same 1, 2, 3, 4. But to the left of 0, we have those same numbers, but they're now negative. -1, -2, -3, and -4. And the farther those negative numbers are from 0, the less value they have. Okay? So if that's a little confusing, let's take a look at some examples. For example, temperature. Temperature sometimes is so cold that 0 is not enough to describe how cold it is. So sometimes temperatures are colder than 0, below 0. So temperatures that are above 0, that's what have our usual positive temperatures. But when it's below 0, that is when temperatures become negative. Or another example is elevation. When elevation at sea level is 0, the standard, that's a standard, just 0 feet. But anything above sea level, for example, mountains and hills, those all have a positive elevation. But anything below sea level, anything deep in the ocean, that is where we see negative elevations. Another example is in money. When you have money in your account or when you have money in general, you are positive. But when you owe money, or if you borrowed money and you need to pay someone back and you're in debt, you are now negative. So, in this moment, take out a sheet of paper and pause the video to write down these rules. So, when it comes to adding and subtracting integers, if they have the same sign, we add the numbers, but we keep the sign. Now, if they have different signs, like for example, if one is negative and we're adding it to a positive, you just subtract the numbers, but you keep the sign of the larger value. And if that's a little confusing, don't worry, we're going to do some examples together now. Let's look at this first example. -1 plus -3. They have the same sign. So what do we do when we have the same sign? We just add the numbers. So 1 plus 3 is 4, and we keep the sign. They're both negative, so we make this -4. So -1 plus -3 is equal to -4. Now what about this one? We have -4 plus 2. They have different signs. So what are we doing when they have different signs? We subtract these. So -4 plus 2, we're going to do 4 minus 2, which is 2. And what did it say? That we keep the sign of the larger value. So let's just look at the numbers. We have 4 and we have 2. Which one's larger, 4 or 2? Definitely 4. So since 4 is a larger number, we're going to keep the sign of whatever that number is, which is negative. So -4 plus 2 is -2. Now, if that's a little confusing, let's use a number line. So let's say we start at -4. Okay, let's start at -4. And we're going to add 2. So since we're adding, we're going to go to the right of the number line because remember that our number lines increase from left to right. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the right 2 times. 1, 2. And where do I leave off? On -2. So that just confirms that our answer, -4 plus 2, is equal to -2. Another way to think about it is what if someone owed you $4 and they only paid you back 2? They still owe you $2, which means that that person is still -$2. Another example is like this: -2 plus 5. They have different signs, which means that we're going to subtract them. So 5 minus 2 is 3. And we keep the sign of the larger value. So if we were to do 2 compared with 5, which one's bigger? Definitely 5. and 5 is positive. Unless it explicitly has a negative in front, always know that it's going to be positive. So since 5 is bigger than 2, we're going to keep the positive of 5 and we're going to make 3 positive. And now let's check on our number line. We're going to start at negative 2, and since it's plus, we're increasing. I'm going to go to the right 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And where did I leave off? On positive 3. So now try these on your own. Make sure to pause the video, and when you're ready, just unpause it and let's work on them together. So we have negative 5 plus 2. Different signs, which means we're going to subtract them. 5 minus 2 is 3. And we have 5 versus 2. Which one is bigger, 5 or 2? Definitely 5. So we're going to keep the sign of 5, which is negative, which means negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. Think about it. If someone owed you $5, but they only paid you back 2, they still owe you $3, which means that they're still negative $3. Negative 3 plus 9. They have different signs, so what do? We subtract them. 9 minus 3 is equal to 6. And 3 versus 9. 9 is a bigger number, so we're going to keep the sign of 9, which is positive. So we just write positive 6. Negative 6 minus 3. Now keep in mind that this negative, this minus, belongs to the 3. So this is the same thing as saying negative 6 plus negative 3. So those two are the same thing, so just keep that in mind. So since they're the same sign, we're going to add them. So 6 plus 3 is 9. And what do we do when we have the same sign? We keep it. So we're going to make this negative 9. Last example. Negative 4 minus 10. Remember that this is negative 4 plus negative 10. So since they're the same sign, I'm just going to add them. 4 plus 10 is 14, and they're same sign, so we're just going to keep it. So therefore, negative 4 minus 10 is negative 14. Think about it this way. They now owe you negative $14. So now we're going to take a look at multiplying and dividing, the rules for multiplying and dividing integers. So now make sure to write these down on those notes that you were keeping track of. If they have the same signs, then you should have a positive answer. Okay? So when you multiply or divide with two numbers that have the same sign, it's always going to be a positive number. For example, 2 times 3 is equal to 6, right? Negative 2 times negative 3, since they have the same sign, it's always going to be positive. So this would still be positive 6. Two negatives make a positive. Now, if they're different signs, it's always going to be a negative number. If I had negative 2 times positive 3, that negative number is always going to be more positive. So therefore, negative 2 times 3 will give us negative 6. And remember that anytime that we multiply or divide by 0, it's always going to be 0. So let's do some examples. Negative 3 times 4. So what's 3 times 4? We're just going to multiply those numbers like normal. 3 times 4 is 12. And since one is negative and one is positive, it's always going to be negative because they're different signs. Now what about this one? Negative 12 divided by 3. 12 divided by 3 is just 4. And since they're different signs, remember that we have that invisible positive. Since they're different signs, this is going to be negative because we always make it negative when they're different. That negative is always more powerful than the positive. Now, what about this one? Negative 3 times negative 5. So we're going to multiply them like normal. 3 times 5 is 15. And two negatives make a positive. They're the same sign, so it's going to be positive. So I'll just leave it as just 15. 15 divided by negative 15 divided by negative 3 gives us 5. And since two negatives make a positive, the same sign always gives us a positive answer. We're just going to leave it as positive 5. So now take a moment and pause the video and try these out. And when you're ready, unpause it and we'll go through them together. Negative 12 divided by 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6. And we have different signs. We have one negative and one positive, which means we keep it. So we're going to have that negative 6. If we have negative 3 times positive 9, 3 times 9 is 27, and a negative times a positive, we're going to keep the negative. Different signs is always negative. 8, negative 8 times negative 3. 8 times 3 is 24, and since they're the same signs, two negatives make a positive, the same sign is always going to be positive. So I'll just leave it as positive 24. And last one, negative 36 divided by negative 6. 36 divided by 6 is just 6. Two negatives make a positive, the same sign is always positive. So therefore, I'll just leave this as positive 6.